When I saw my nephew, I couldn't resist. My name is Shelley and I'm married to Josh. We don't have children, but we live in a spacious house in a charming town in Florida which feels like a slice of paradise. Josh is a truck driver and is always on the road, which provides a good income but also means he's rarely home. Because of that, I often find myself looking for other ways to satisfy my desires. Our marriage has always been good, but there are moments when I feel lonely, especially on the nights when he's away. One day my sister asked me for a favor. Her son Christian needed to stay in Florianopolis for a while to prepare for a military exam. Josh, always generous and kind-hearted, agreed immediately. When Christian arrived, I was surprised at how much he had changed. He wasn't the boy I remembered anymore. He had grown into a strong and attractive young man, the kind that would catch any woman's attention. As he walked through the door, I greeted him with a smile. Christian, you've grown so much. So handsome and strong, you must be quite popular with the girls. I joked. He laughed casually and said he was too busy with training and studies to think about girls. His seriousness and focus intrigued me, and something inside me began to shift. That week Josh had to go on another trip, leaving just me and Christian at home. Although he didn't realize it, I was already making plans, something new and thrilling that made me excited for what might happen on the first day. I made a simple lunch, but I felt more nervous than usual with him around for lunch. I chose to wear something a bit more daring, curious to see how he would react. When Christian came to help me in the kitchen, he tried to be polite, but I could tell he couldn't help but glance at me. Do you think this outfit is too much? Sorry, I have a habit of dressing comfortably at home, I said casually. Christian smiled a little surprised and replied, no, you look great, don't worry. During lunch we chatted casually about the exam and his training routine. I complimented his physique, saying he looked like a TV actor, and he thanked me, mentioning how dedicated he had been. As the days passed, I began to notice that Christian understood what I was doing, but being very respectful said nothing. However, the atmosphere between us slowly began to change. One afternoon while we were washing dishes together, I purposely dropped a spoon on the floor and slowly bent down to pick it up. I knew he was watching, and when I stood back up, I noticed he was quieter, trying to hide his nervousness. Is everything okay, Christian? I asked casually. He said yes, that he was just thinking about his training, but I could tell his unease was coming from somewhere else. That night as I lay in bed, I reflected on what was happening. It wasn't just teasing, there was something more, a new and risky feeling, but one that made me more and more curious. On an ordinary evening, after making sure everything was in order around the house, I decided to go to Christian's room. As I approached, I heard his voice on the phone. Not wanting to invade his privacy, but unable to resist, I pressed my ear against the door. What I heard made my heart race. Man, my aunt, she's testing me. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. I went back to my room with that thought spinning in my head. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop thinking about the possibilities. I tossed and turned in bed, imagining what it would be like if I decided to take things further. The next night, as I passed by Christian's room again, I overheard his voice on the phone once more. This time he sounded agitated, saying something like, I don't know what to do, just thinking about her drives me crazy. The desire in his voice was clear. I knew he was about to cross a line. I stayed there listening, and when he hung up, I waited a few moments before moving away. I didn't want to rush things, but knowing he thought of me that way excited me. I went to bed that night with a smile on my face, knowing this was only the beginning. It wasn't just about Christian, it was about the power I had over him and how it made me feel alive again. It was time to see how far this game could go. One day, I decided to take a long, relaxing shower. As I entered the bathroom, I realized I had forgotten the towel in my room. I smiled, knowing it was the perfect excuse. In a sweet voice, I called out to Christian, asking him to bring me the towel. It's on my bed, could you grab it for me? I asked, trying to sound casual. Christian, always polite, quickly fetched it. When he reached the bathroom door, I said, come in, Christian. If I come out like this, I'll get the whole floor wet. He hesitated for a moment, but then stepped inside, handing me the towel without looking directly at me. I noticed how nervous he was, almost trembling, as he tried to keep his composure. When I took the towel from his hands, our eyes finally met, and for a second it felt like time had stopped. Wrapped only in the steam from the shower, I felt the heat of the situation unfolding. He quickly looked away, embarrassed, and mumbled something about needing to leave. As he turned to go, I couldn't resist teasing him a little more. Thank you, sweetheart. I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable, I said softly, watching the nervousness on his face. Christian shook his head, unable to respond, and quickly left the bathroom, closing the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, I leaned against the wall. Feeling my heart race, I knew I was getting to him, but I was also getting to myself. That night, as I tried to sleep, I imagined what might be going through Christian's mind at that moment. Was he also struggling with his own desires, just like I was? The thought that he might be thinking of me in that way made me smile. Maybe it was time to take the next step, but cautiously, so as not to go too far. Later, I put on a light nightgown and went to the living room where he was sitting on the couch. concentrating on something on the TV. Without saying a word, I walked past him, feeling his eyes follow me. I stopped at the kitchen door, under the excuse of grabbing a glass of water. Christian, it's late, don't you want to rest a little? I asked in a low, soft tone. I'm not sleepy, aunt. I think I'll stay here a bit longer, he replied, trying to sound calm, but I knew he was nervous. Well, I'm going to bed. If you need anything, I'll be in my room, I said, leaving a hint of uncertainty in the air. As I reached the door, I looked back and caught him watching me closely. His eyes couldn't turn away from me. That night, I couldn't sleep. What had happened during the day was still fresh in my mind. I got up and walked silently to Christian's room. I stopped in front of the closed door, listening to his soft breathing. I knocked lightly, and with a sleepy voice he asked me to come in. When I entered, he was lying down, covered up to his waist, but clearly awake. I couldn't sleep, I said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. I've noticed you've been a bit quiet with me. Is everything okay, dears? Christian hesitated, but eventually confessed, Aunt Shelley, sometimes I feel a little disoriented, wanting to go out and have fun, yet I need to focus on my schoolwork. I understand, I replied, placing my hand gently over his. Sometimes when we're alone, feelings become more intense, but you don't need to worry. The touch of my hand seemed to both calm and stir Christian even more. I could see in his eyes that he was battling that desire. You're special to me, Christian, and I just want you to know that I said I'm sorry if I sometimes wear clothing that are a bit suggestive. I just feel more comfortable that way, but if it bothers you, I can dress differently, I added, smiling softly. He looked at me reassured, but with hunger in his eyes. I don't mind, Aunt Shelley, he replied, almost embarrassed, but like you said, when a man sees a woman like you at that moment, I knew the game was about to begin, but it wasn't time to move forward just yet. I slowly pulled away and stood up, letting my hand slide from his "good night, dear, rest well," I murmured before leaving the room. Josh came home for a few days, and with him normality returned to our married life, but now there was something that only Christian and I shared: our connection. He looked at me differently, and the subtle teasing and meaningful glances became more frequent, waiting for the right moment. You're teasing me, aren't you? I asked with a mix of playfulness and a bit of nervousness. He responded with a tone that was both light and serious. Stepping away before the situation could get more intense, he went back to the barbecue, where Josh was completely unaware of what was happening in the kitchen. I stayed there alone, trying to regain control over the situation and my thoughts. Later during dinner, the intense glances between Christian and me continued, but Josh, completely oblivious, didn't notice anything. When Josh left on a trip, the house became quiet again, leaving room for the teasing between Christian and me to increase. One night, after a relaxing bath, I put on a soft, short silk nightgown. I lay in bed, but couldn't sleep. I knew Christian was in the next room, probably as restless as I was. The thought that he might be thinking about me just as I was thinking about him made me smile. I got up discreetly and went to the door of his room. I waited for a second before making my decision. With light steps, I proceeded to Christian's room and knocked softly on the door. "Come in," I heard his voice, a little surprised when I opened the door. I found him sitting on the bed, shirtless, his muscles glistening in the soft light. His eyes held a mix of desire and something more. I told him that I couldn't sleep, that maybe I needed company. Christian looked at me for a moment, assessing the situation before responding that he wasn't sleepy either. His eyes traveled down my body, and I felt the heat rise between us. I slowly approached, stopping by the bed. "Can I sit down?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He nodded his head as I sat next to him. The closeness made the tension rise even more. Our eyes met, and at that moment I knew I was about to cross a boundary. "Are you teasing me today?" I asked, trying to control my excitement. "You've teased me so much, now let me enjoy it," he replied, still with a firm voice but full of desire. We kissed deeply, and I had never felt so relieved. After a while, Christian said, "Now I understand why Josh is with you." I responded by saying that Josh didn't know how to appreciate what he had, and that I ended up seeking fun elsewhere, but with Christian there everything seemed perfect. Days went by and Josh was still away. The house, once a refuge, became a playing field where every word exchanged between Christian and me held a hidden meaning. When Josh returned from his trip, he soon went out for a drink at the bar, leaving me at home with Christian. He approached me from behind as he always did, and I told him to calm down because Josh was home, but Christian couldn't control himself anymore. And when night fell and Josh was deeply asleep, I went to Christian's room. As soon as I entered, locking the door, he was already ready to welcome me, and once again we gave in to our forbidden passion. We stayed together all night and ended up sleeping right there. The next day my nephew spent the day out taking his final exam for the contest. When I went to the market and returned, he was already asleep, exhausted. I decided not to disturb him and let him rest, knowing he would be more worn out with me over the next few days than with the exam. We spent the entire week together until the moment came for him to return to his city. When the day of his departure arrived, I thanked him for all the moments we shared that month. With a teasing smile I said, "I was surprised by you, Christian, today. You're officially my favorite nephew." He laughed and replied, "Thank you, Aunt Shelley. These days I spent here were a huge learning experience for me. If everything works out, I could come back, since if I get the job it will be Here in Florianopolis, that way I could stay at your house for a good while if you want, of course, without hesitate. I said, of course my dear, the doors are always open. I can't wait for us to have more fun. I think we were still very discreet. We can be bolder next time. We talked for a while before he left. Now I'm just waiting for him to message me, confirming the day he'll come back. I've already told Josh, and he didn't mind. Said Christian can stay here at the house without any problems.